finished Arsenal 2, Tottenham 1 in the North London derby. A Wednesday night treat, as the commentary team were fond of. Basically, the commentary team told us everything that's ever happened tonight. They'd never stopped talking. Like, for some reason, commentary has now become three men having a full conversation over the top of the football. But that's a different story. They were keen to tell us that the last time Arsenal played Spurs on a Wednesday night was 2008 when it was 4-4. It wasn't quite 4-4, but it was still a pretty interesting game. It kind of, if it perhaps wasn't pulsating, you could see it from there. I thought it was a pretty interesting night, pretty exciting match. But it ended 2-1 to Arsenal. What did you make of it in terms of general thoughts to open us up?
Well, I guess my first thought is Arsenal desperately needed that win. And my second thought is how they nearly ended up not getting it, because really that was a game they should have won several times over. Yeah. They're completely dominant until they went a goal down. And then, having sort of sorted that out, they then proceeded to miss chance on chance on chance. And there was nothing really to suggest that Spurs were going to get an equaliser, but Arsenal missing those chances. That was the only thing that was putting it in your head, really, in that you're like, they've managed to not only miss chances, but not make the most of very promising situations. I mean, the current Spurs back four will be burnt on my brain for the rest of eternity. It feels like they've been playing with that makeshift back four for like several years. And, I think every criticism of Tottenham has to be tempered with the knowledge that the personnel at the back is what it is at the moment. But, that they were struggling in the last 25 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, from the off, really, Arsenal put Spurs under a lot of early pressure. The first 10 minutes was full on. You could tell they had really tried to almost like steamroller them early on. Home, they're at home. It's a derby game. The atmosphere is quite fierce. The keeper Spurs have is, he's actually held himself in quite good esteem in the first couple of games I've seen him in. But this is a whole new level of a test, and I thought he stood up to it quite well. But it was like 4 corners in 3 minutes at one point. I think Arsenal had 10 corners overall, which is like something that they're really kind of rapidly becoming very, very well known for now, consistently. And I think, in many ways, it was almost ironic, actually, that Arsenal concede early-ish on from a corner. They don't really defend properly. They can't defend the first ball okay, but the second phase, which obviously top-level coaches are super keen to make sure their teams dominate on, it was just non-existent in the second phase. A bit fortunate from Son to strike the ball and get a deflection on its way in, but nevertheless, it was a really good thing to happen to the game from the neutral point of view, because it meant that Arsenal, as you've already pointed out, desperate for a win, desperate to kind of keep up on the coattails of Liverpool and really kind of at least try and make a good fist of it. And for them to concede a goal in that manner, it was almost a bit like, okay, they really have to go for it now. And it ended up being a pretty entertaining game because of it. And obviously we'll come on to a bit more of the action. But at this point, I just wanted to point out that I wonder, this is a bit of perhaps a big shout from me, and maybe our listeners will ridicule me again for the 5 millionth time this season. But what about this for a shout? I think Gabriel is the best player in the league in both penalty areas. I think he's the best dual threat player in the league. I have never seen someone possibly, and it's tricky, isn't it? Because sometimes you get forwards who are really dominant but are also really good in their defensive box, like a Didier Drogba type character who was so important for Chelsea defending set pieces. But in terms of a defensive first player, with the exception of Virgil van Dijk, I can't think of anyone in the same league as Gabriel in terms of playing in both penalty areas. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, they've managed to maximise his ability at both ends of the field. He's not always been peerless defensively for Arsenal, but he's grown and grown.
He is now, though,
over the last couple of years. Yeah, he has, absolutely. It's taken a while for him to get there, but he has got there, and yeah, he's just undefendable, basically, in the opposition box. Like, completely what he's going to do, but you can't really do anything about it.
And we should probably point out at this juncture that the corner that Gabriel scores, but obviously he's not credited for scoring from, awarded to Arsenal, didn't look like it was a corner, but obviously we're not in control of what the officials do, and Arsenal fans have been surprisingly quiet about that, given that if it had been the other way round, a load of them probably would have detonated a nuclear bomb by now about how disappointed they would be at the refereeing, and it would have been some kind of conspiracy against them, presumably. But that's just why I don't spend much of the time on Twitter anymore. It wasn't a corner, but it doesn't take away from how good Gabriel is in these situations.
And I guess when you're talking about a two-way player like that, I agree. I think he could be the Premier League's Kawhi Leonard at the moment, or fit Kawhi Leonard. Anyway, the reason I've said that,
qualify that to our listenership, Andy. You got to know your audience.
The reason I threw in an NBA reference, I'm sorry, listeners, is because Darren Fletcher did it. I've never had a problem with Darren Fletcher, but when he got stuck in and used an NBA reference in the second half, I think at a point where it really wasn't deserved, and everyone hooked onto it, and it's, oh yeah, it's like the NBA, which means it's like basketball, which means there's action at both ends. It's like, right, okay. Really?
Yeah. I find, I mean, you don't have a problem with Darren Fletcher. That's your business. I very much do have a problem with Darren Fletcher, ever since he was rude to me in an interview once. And I will not let that go. Because you know why I won't let it go, Andy? Because he's done nothing in his output since to give me any room to let it go. The commentary team, I think Andy McCall's is flying way too close to the sun as well. They just need to calm down a bit. Like, it ain't about you, it's about the football. And it's really kind of actually fairly difficult to concentrate on what you're watching with this endless chatter going on that you don't need. Like, and so that NBA point, like, I mean, sometimes people do say, you know, the game's a bit back and forth. And this happens in the Premier League a lot now, by the way. The last 25 minutes of Premier League games, all the time, you have you attack, we attack, you attack, we attack. And in this case, actually, it was quite interesting because Arsenal seemed to really indulge that when they were winning in a way they didn't when they were behind. Like, when the game was 0-0 and when they were behind, it was all very measured and all very, almost like frustratingly slow. It's almost like they take corners really slowly on purpose to try and affect the concentration of the opposite team or something. But when they go 2-1 up, it's frantic. So it happens a lot. But like, it's not an original point that Darren Fletcher's making there, but he just says it in a way that he thinks he's so clever about it, you know. Anyway, I'm getting diverted. Gabriel was man of the match. Player of the match. He was fantastic. Obviously, he's not going to be credited with that equaliser because Solanke's going to be given that as an own goal. But he does what he always does. He's got so many different threats in how he plays. Like, defensively, he's positionally very good. He's an absolute monster for strength. He's good with the ball at his feet, or good enough at least. He's a good header of the ball. Like I say, he's positionally good. And then in attacking set pieces, the timing of his runs is almost like consistently impeccable. Like, his timing of his runs is perfect. And that doesn't happen very often. And I think Declan Rice, for example, I know Odegaard takes a lot of the corners, but when Declan Rice takes them, he gets a lot of credit for the quality of the delivery, which is right. But the quality of Gabriel's runs and the timing of them is honestly so good.
Yeah, they are. And it was funny when they showed the slow-mo of the goal, which sadly is not going to be credited to him, as you said. His eyes lit up like Noel Coward when Michael Caine tells him about the bank job that could affect the balance of payments in the Italian job. It just
That's
got
your second
really,
Italian job reference of the day, by the way, to me.
Thank you. Well, I didn't think the first one was acknowledged.
The first one was about traffic lights off air, which I'm making it sound a lot more boring than it actually was. It was actually very interesting.
But it was quite funny how he got this furtive look on his face, and he's like, "Yes, I'm having this." It was really amusing. But he's fantastic, and even if he's not going to score, he's just going to be a problem for defenders as well. He's so aggressive and so smart with it as well. He's absolutely what they need at the moment. He's absolutely what they need, especially at this moment, just because Arsenal are still not fluent. I mean, it's amazing to me that you talked in the main show on Wednesday about how Liverpool have had a few little hiccups results-wise. I think because it feels as if Liverpool are so superior to everyone else this season, it can be a bit of a surprise to look at the table now, and admittedly Liverpool still have the extra game to play, but that Arsenal are only 4 points behind. Because when you look at the way that things have rolled out over the last couple of months, it feels as if there's an enormous gap between the two. But Arsenal's ability to just stay in it, I think, is something at this point that you have to salute. I do think, though, tonight was an accident waiting to happen that finally didn't happen for them, as we said before. They left Spurs alive for far too long in this game, and that will maybe end up costing them somewhere down the line. So yes, I do expect Arsenal to find greater fluency, but especially with Gabriel Jesus going down, they need to be buying or loaning a striker in this window.
And it was interesting, wasn't it? Because, there's an element of chaos about Spurs. I know they've had two decent. Oh no, let me rephrase that. Not decent result. They had a decent result against Liverpool, and they got through by the skin of their teeth against some part timers. But nevertheless, they're in. They're still in the FA Cup, and last two results have been positive results. We have to say that. But their league form has been appalling. I think it's 5 points in the last 9 games.
It's awful.
Relegation. Obviously not going to be relegated, but that is the form of a relegation-threatened team.
Well, it's not European form, is it?
No, it's not. And I think you are right to say what you said at the top of this about their defensive issues and that kind of stuff. I do have some sympathy for that, but I caveat that sympathy by saying, while I understand that Archie Gray is playing out of position and acquitting himself well, he's still one of the most outstanding young talents in Europe. While I understand that Dragusin isn't first choice centre back for Spurs and is a bit of a head on a stick, he cost a lot of money. And while I understand that Jed Spence isn't going to be the first choice left back for Spurs, he also cost a lot of money and was one of the the standout young talents in England at the time. And it's just as easy to ask a question as to why those players don't look anywhere near as good. Why the drop-off is so big? Because Arsenal themselves have had to play Thomas Partey at right back, and they've had, and they're kind of, to an extent these days, as you well know, every team has personnel issues because of the sheer amount of football that's played. So I wouldn't be, it's difficult to have a massive amount of sympathy for them, especially when every single game they play, they're like a windsock. Like they blow in whatever direction's happening. They can't maintain any control. And you come away from the games thinking it could have been different. Like I would say a key moment in the game, by the way, just after Arsenal equalised, Kulusevski has a gilt-edged chance that he doesn't score. I mean, how he doesn't score, I don't know. He's about 5 yards out and he smashes the ball straight at the keeper. If he scores that, it could be one of those quote-unquote famous nights for Spurs, like when they beat Liverpool in the Cup or they turn over Aston Villa by a load of goals, whatever. And they beat Man City 4-0. I know Man City were kind of down and out at that point, but they're capable of doing it. It's just there's absolutely no control whatsoever in when they do it and how. And so because of the way they play. And I also think, just to finish this point, I'm not bagging on Spurs for any particular reason, but like even when Spurs had all their first choice defensive players, that anyone who was interested in kind of defending Spurs or supporting them, whatever, would tell you are all great players. They couldn't keep a clean sheet to save their lives. So like it's not as though they were kind of Saki's Milan before they got these defenders taken out of the team anyway. So I don't know. I just think there's a little bit more to it than just the fact they're missing players. Yes, you have to say it. Even Porro, their first choice right back, he can't fucking defend. Like he gets turned into Leandro Trossard turned him so heavy that he almost tore his knee ligament. Like he sold himself so heavy that he almost tore his knee ligament. I mean, it was one of the best turns and one of the worst pieces of defending you'll see. And the gaps he leaves and the one-on-one defending. And then he'll go up into the other area in the last minute and smash one off the post because that's what he's all about. But all I'm saying is there's a lot more to it than just there's a few players missing is all I'm saying, I suppose. 100%.
And while in terms of the players missing, to get that out of the way first off, of course they're unlucky, but I think to lean into one of your Tottenham themes, it's to do with squad construction and resource as well. They've got the resources, and maybe they went into this season a little bit light on defenders. I don't think that's especially controversial to say that, and I don't think it's just saying that with the benefit of hindsight. In terms of the way they play, I mean, it's indisputably the case, isn't it? And I think it's one thing not having your first choice players, as we said, and it's another thing players who are good players not being in the position to do what they should be able to do. Look, anyone who's seen any of Pedro Porro before he turned up in the Premier League knows he's a right wing back. If you want to play him as a right back in a back four, then fine. But you've got to take the rough with the smooth. You know, I don't think anyone who's seen him on a regular basis thinks he's coming to the club and he's going to play the right back in a back four. It's just not a goer, really. And I think you could argue the same about Destiny Udogie when everyone's fit to a certain extent as well. But you're right. I think it is a whole matter of not just tactics, but attitude, a sense of like what is important to the team as well. I find it amazing when you look at Trossard's goal. Dragusin can see him coming for a really long time, and there's just no real will to get over there. I just don't really understand that in a derby situation. I mean, firstly, if you're playing as a centre half next to Porro, you've got to be prepared to get your ass over there now and then. But secondly, it's just, you can see it's absolutely telegraphed. The ball, the run, and like belatedly, when Trossard can see the whites of Kinsky's eyes, he thinks, maybe I should make a bit of a move towards the ball. I mean, I find that unbelievable, and I don't just lay that at him. It's they're a team that doesn't want to do the difficult things. They just don't.
I think Kinsky, from what I've seen, looks good actually, and I think he was a bit harshly treated by the commentary team in the game for a couple of reasons. One, I would just say because he's clearly been asked to invite the press when he's got the ball, and Postecoglou. I mean, Joe Hart's talked about this in quite a lot of detail when he played under Postecoglou. He says that he sometimes likes the keepers to invite the press, and then likes them to clip the ball over the top and turn them around. And Kinsky had obviously been asked to do that, a bit of that, and that is high risk. We know Postecoglou's team's high risk.
The flick around Martinelli though was amazing.
Oh, that was one of my favourite moments of the season. Let me tell you why. Because for those of you who are listening to this, didn't watch the game in any kind of detail. At one point, Kinsky miscontrols a ball that comes back to him. It's quite a shitty pass back to him actually, and he's under pressure because Arsenal got the full press, and he eventually flicks it out wide, and he gets away with it, and it's actually a nice piece of play to the left back position. But before he does that, when he miscontrols it, the ball bounces up and hits his hand. And if you watch the replay, in the background, there's about 300 Arsenal fans all instinctively appealing for handball, even though he's a keeper in the area. It's brilliant. And excuse me. And the second point I wanted to make was just that if you watch the replay of that Trossard goal, completely agree with your analysis of it. It's a great goal. Trossard was actually pretty lively. I thought it does. I think you're right to say about Porro being a wing back, and I think it's obvious that where his shortcomings are. It doesn't look great when he's not only dominated by Trossard, but like Miles Lewis-Skelly in the left back position has such a good game as well.
Oh, he's great.
But on the goal itself, if you watch the replay, Kinsky looks like he should save it, but actually it bobbles up and goes almost between his hands. I think you'd have to have pretty superhuman reactions to be able to respond to that in time.
And it's very well hit as well.
Yeah. So look, ultimately, I think it's a game that Arsenal have won. It's a game they needed to win. There are kind of still. I mean, you mentioned earlier the idea about them, needing some kind of striker. It's not that Arsenal don't. This is the thing. It's not they don't score enough goals, because obviously only Liverpool have scored more than them, and they share the goals around, and that's fine. But it just feels to me, and forgive me because this is quite an obvious thing to say, but I think it's worth pointing out anyway. It just feels like with the more cutting edge and someone who's ruthless, they would score loads more because they don't take the chances.
They would, and it's not just about winning games like the Manchester United one in the FA Cup at the weekend. But I think if you look at a game like tonight, which they should have killed way earlier, as we said,
Havertz again.
Yeah, exactly.
3 chances, didn't score anything.
Yeah, he's not having a great time at the moment. But I think you look at that, and one of the things we talk about the most is the load on the players at the moment. What greater way could there be of lifting that load than by being a few goals in front and being able to rotate some of your players and being able to to spread your efforts a little bit more. If you're 3-4-1 up, which really they should have been going into the last 20 minutes, it's completely different, and you get yourselves a breather. And if you add that game on game on game, games on games in which Arsenal are way better than the opposition and yet still have to fight to the end, it makes a massive difference.
Yeah, and my if I were an Arsenal fan, my big bugbear would just be what Alexander Isak's doing at Newcastle. They play a 4-3-3 as well. He's a focal point. He's so good on in so many different areas. If you take Havertz out of that team and put Isak in it, it's a very, very different season for Arsenal. Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I think that is it, hindsight, because unfortunately they've let him get so good that they now can't afford him.
Well, there's no way to get him now. Exactly, they're not going to get him now.
It's not possible.
There's absolutely no foreseeable way that anyone at Newcastle at this point can let Alexander Isak leave. This is never going to happen.
If they've got a PSR problem, they would literally rather sell anyone but him, and quite rightly so.
Yeah. Totally. So look, in summary, good game, nice pace to it, nice intensity. It's what you expect from a North London derby. I absolutely love, I know I've kind of bagged on Spurs a little bit there, but they are in terrible form, and I think it's fair to point out the last however many league games they've had have been really difficult for them. Personnel issues notwithstanding, but at the risk of coming across like a closet Arsenal fan, which I'm absolutely not. I love that song they have at the start of the Arsenal games as well. Is it North London Forever or whatever it's called? Brilliant. It's such a good new tradition they've got there. I was there for the Newcastle game last season. They won quite handily. I think it's 4-1 off the top of my head. And the atmosphere there, I was surprised by how good it was, because you just get told that it's crap there, but it isn't actually crap. It's actually really good.
It's not, and the Emirates is something for night matches as well. I mean, it's something we were talking about on the main ramble yesterday, wasn't it? About how that sort of new stadium versus old stadium thing in the Premier League, and how sometimes that can be a bit of an issue. Because I would say even at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, where the atmosphere can really get up, it's quite hard to keep up. I think you get a lot quiet and a lot of drift there, like say you do at the London Stadium as well. Arguably, you could say that about St James's Park, which is I think a similar size as well. But Arsenal, especially for night matches, is very underrated.
I just think they have. I just have sympathy with Spurs fans just because they have to put up with so much shit all the time. And they've basically just been gaslit about how great it would be when the new stadium comes and how much they'd have money to spend on all these players, and they just don't. I mean, they have spent some money, of course, but their recruitment is pretty poor, and overall it doesn't really get them anywhere. And so I kind of feel like it's quite a lot to ask, because with Spurs as a team, you're never more than a game or two away from a total disaster. You expect Spurs fans to be happy to get to lose 6-3 to Liverpool. All right, it's an exciting game, but you're on the wrong end of a bit of a whooping, and then
point taken.
Yeah, they end up drawing against Wolves. All this kind of stuff goes on. So I think if they were good, like for example, I can remember the season they got to the Champions League final. Right, the atmosphere going and watching them was amazing. There's such a good feel good factor around the place. So it does kind of depend on that a little bit.